Good afternoon, everyone. And as I mentioned, in this second week, we've invited to have somebody come here to explain from the funeral home perspective what we do as far as planning for a funeral in the Catholic Church. And it's my pleasure to, of course, for those of you who don't know him, Richard Mansfield from Miles Funeral Home.
And T. Tommaso.
Tommaso, I'm reading your notes, Rick.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, from the funeral home, also who specializes in the pre-planning phase of everything. So without any further ado, I will turn this over to Renee.
Thank you. Thank you, Father Nichols. You're right. We're no strangers to St. George's Church, that's for sure. But thanks again, Father Nichols, Father Miguel, who's here, and Deacon Paul. Thank you for having me and having Amber. We're going to talk to you a little bit about prearranging funerals, why families do it, some of the emotions that they have when somebody dies. So the last time I was here was very informal. Today we have some folks at home with us, so I'll stay a little close to the podium. Usually I'm running around, so I'll stay kind of close. But what I'd like to do is, this time I brought a little presentation with me, and I thought it would be important to talk about what happens when somebody dies, some of the emotions they have, because it helps us lead up to why the value and why we would prearrange a funeral. So a lot of what we do today is interactive. So as we go through some of these slides, you can stop me at any time or ask Amber. Amber is a certified specialist in advanced planning. She has a master's in education, and she's a lot smarter than me, so it's always good to have people that are smarter than you on board. That's what Paul told me anyway, right, Paul? So, so the first slide you see up here says, planning is bringing the future into the present so that we can do something about it now. And that's basically what we do when we prearrange a funeral, is we kind of look into the future and say, what is it that is important to me? And we have a lot of members of the church here that I have met with over the years, and their children aren't quite sure what to do, particularly when they die unexpectedly. So these questions come up. Mom was faithful, Dad was faithful, we want to go to church, we want to have a mass. So this is what happens. I'm going to take you through a little journey. Amber. So we all know some of the feelings when someone dies, the feelings that we have. It's a very surreal experience, of course. I remember my dad died, and how tough it was leaving UMass Hospital. He was 68 years old. And just saying to myself, as tears are going out of my eyes on a beautiful sunny day, I can't believe that my children are going to have to go through what I'm doing. But I wouldn't change that for anything. So at the time I had with him, the love that we shared. So, but I still had to go through this. I'm the funeral director. I see this every day, right? But I'm just a person too. So I had some of the same feelings, the shock, the numbness, the denial, the disbelief. You know, could I have done something different? Sometimes we call that guilt. I had one woman say to me, if I had taken care of my husband, maybe if I had had a different diet for him, that might have made a difference in his longevity. These are all things that come up when somebody dies. And over time, you know, we learn to live with grief, and we reconcile with it, but we never fully get over it. But those are some of the emotions that we have. My grief is unique, and no two people mourn the same. So even in support groups, when people are together and they're sharing stories, their relationship with their spouse sometimes is different than others around them with their spouses, their children, family dynamics. There's so many things that come into it. So the nature of the relationship of the person who has died, circumstances surrounding the death. Was it sudden? Had it been a long illness? A lot of times when it's a long illness, people are so tired they come into the funeral home. Sometimes they make arrangements. I don't even recognize them the next day when they're all dressed up and dolled up. It's just so tired. Circumstances surrounding their support system. Well, we live in a day, you probably all remember, most of us in this room are over 60, except for maybe a couple of folks on TV too. But you know, it's very difficult. In our support system when we were younger, we had a lot more people that stayed in the community. You know, you were born there, you were raised there, and you stayed there. So when there was a death, everybody rallied. You know, they came over the house, the relatives were there. It was a time to share some of those feelings. Well, we don't always have that. But what you do have is your church community, and that's what's so critical. And that's why it's so important for us as we prearrange funerals. We talk to families about the importance of going to church, having Mass, and connecting with those close friends that are great support. Your unique personality, who we are, has an effect. The unique personality of the deceased. Not everybody is a happy person, right? So our relationships are all different. Your own culture, religious background. Okay, Amber. So talks a little bit about values of funerals. And if you can't hear me, let me know. Offers survivors social support. And that's what we talked about a few minutes ago, that social support. Having the neighbor come over, our family come over, our relatives, our priest, our support systems. It helps us face the reality of death. You know, and I think of calling hours. I remember when I was in college in Boston, a professor told me, he goes, you know, it's really difficult to go through calling hours. He goes, but every time somebody comes over to you and shakes your hand or gives you a hug, it's a reminder the death has occurred. It's just one more avenue to allow it in. We can't allow it in too quickly because I think we just fall to pieces, but God gives us this great gift to allow it to come in, numbs us a little bit, just enough to get through what we need to, but lets enough in. We feel the pain, acknowledge the difficulty of the day, but celebrate those great memories, and that's what we're trying to do. Again, our religious beliefs celebrates life that was lived in a way of saying goodbye. And a lot of times when families come in, even if they've decided to have a memorial mass, say, and they decide on cremation, which we don't see as often, we encourage family members to come in and just have a final goodbye. Okay. So these are just some of the benefits of pre-planning a funeral. And Amber, anytime you want to add something, you can. So one of the first things we think of is peace of mind, right? So we think of our family, not only our family, but ourselves, because we feel really good when we know that we're helping our family. So it's a peace of mind for us, knowing that they're going to be taken care of. So that's one of the main reasons we see people come into the funeral home. Again, it talks about our personal beliefs that are important to us. You know, occasionally we have some of the kids come in and they don't live around here, they're out in California, and they say, well, Mom lived a good life and her friends are mostly gone, and so maybe we'll just have a graveside service. And then we talk about that. We get together and we talk about the importance of church in her life and possibly having a mass. And in many cases, after those discussions occur, and then the pastoral associates or the pastor himself will speak with the family, and they'll be reminded of the importance and the value of that. Of course, we're sparing anxiety with the family. It's so tough when somebody dies to kind of put all these things together, and kids do move away today, and they're coming in from all directions and kind of reuniting in a way when they show up. And of course, the financial burden. So there are some families that realize that there is a financial aspect of it. And we're just going to hit on that for a minute because I'm not sure if that's where you want me to go, but I'm going to because it's part of this little presentation. So what do we do as funeral directors? Arrange and implement funeral plans, take custody and care of the deceased. That we bring everybody into our care. Occasionally they're on hospice. At home, we go right to the home 24 hours a day. If they're in a nursing home, we do the same thing. Hospitals, we have to wait for some of the paperwork is ready, and then they allow us to go right to the hospitals. Securing necessary permits and death certificates, and I know a lot of you have been part of that. We compose and place obituaries in newspapers. Sometimes we actually will write them almost like legacy writing, depending how the families want them written. Some of them, I remember opening the paper one day and I saw this obituary, and it was a fella on a motorcycle, right? And I'm thinking, wow, that's a great ad for a motorcycle, right? And I realized it was his obituary. It was the full page in the Worcester paper. I hate to think what that would cost, but that was important to him. So evidently he had told his family, we call in funeral service, they had the talk, talk about what matters to them. And that mattered to him. And then, of course, contacting and arranging with clergy, cemetery florist, and et cetera. And a lot of times we're a little more active now than we used to be with contacting restaurants and function facilities as far as facilitating aftercare dinners and mercy meals of sorts. So I updated this today because I went online and looked at CANA, which is the Cremation Association of America, and just updated some of the figures. So nationally, cremation has been on the rise, and so that's why I had to change some of these slides that I had. And as you can see, cremation is 53%. It's right around there in Massachusetts. It's 56, 57 nationally, and New Hampshire and Vermont is almost 75%, just to kind of give you an idea where cremation is. earth burials are down from what they used to be. Of course, at one time when I started at Miles, there were probably 85% were earth burials. Body donation kind of hovers the same. It's below 1%. And same thing with mausoleum entombment. So that's my wife. When I turned 60 years old, I remember I always wanted a little Miata sports car. So we had a little dinner. We came back home. She goes, by the way, I got you a present. I said, really? What'd you get me? I'm thinking there's something out in the driveway, right? She said, you know that mausoleum at Worcester County Memorial Park where your mom and dad are? I said, yeah. She goes, well, I got you the spot next to them. And I said, Bev, I said, that's my present. So I said, that must be like $5,000 to $10,000, right? I said, how'd you pay for that? She goes, well, I took out a coupon book. I said, a coupon book? Yeah. She goes, for the next 2 years. So 2 years went by. And I remember the night I came home. And there was an envelope from Worcester County Memorial Park. And she goes, you got something in the mail? I said, open it up. And sure enough, congratulations, the owner of this mausoleum crypt. And, and I know all of them at the cemetery. I'm surprised I didn't get like a gold leaf in there or something. But so I looked at my wife and she looked at me. She goes, okay, Smarty Pants, now you can go get your little Miata. But so even the funeral director has to plan their funeral. But and Father Lewandowski, by the way, is going to be with me in eternity in the same little building. We're in a building that's probably only about this big, and he's on the other side of me, so every time I see him, I don't know if he's happy or sad about that. But so I thought we'd just talk a little bit about cost. I mean, cost, as you know, things are not going down. I mean, caskets, services, buildings, usage of everything is just going sky high. So we're trying to monitor the cost the best we can, obviously. We care very much about our family and our serving community, so we always take into consideration that families don't always have enough money for burial. There is no family that will go through my funeral home that won't have a proper burial, no matter what the cost is to me. But for our sake today, an average cost of a funeral that we see range anywhere from $7,500 to $12,000. Some of that would include, like when you see $12,000 when someone says, well, and this is standard kind of funeral service in this area, they'll say, well, $13,000. Well, a lot of times $3,000 of that or $3,500 of that might be the newspaper notice, the cemetery opening. St. John, some of the big cemeteries are $1,700 on a Saturday, $1,800. Newspaper notices are $600 in many cases. So when we advance plan, and I'm going to let you talk to it in a minute, but $650 is what I usually put down when we're advanced planning. Average non-traditional cost of funerals, well, we have all kinds of experiences at Miles Funeral Home, so anywhere from $7,500 to $12,000. Now, there are other programs that we have affiliated with cremation that start, over $3,000 and go up from there. So it just depends, what it is that you'd like to have, and that can be a la carte pricing too. Cash advances, the things I talked to you about a minute ago. I mean, that's something that you do want to think about ahead of time as cemeteries. We also handle a lot of Jewish funerals in Worcester County. I had a cemetery recently down in Sharon. The family, by the time they got down at the cemetery, they bought one grave, bought a vault that goes in the grave, they bought a marker that goes on the grave, canopy. The graveside service that day was $8,500 for one grave. So just to kind of give you an idea what things can cost. So, to keep an eye on that, some of the town cemeteries are a little bit less than the bigger cemeteries. So we have, for example, a cemetery in Holden. I don't think you have to be a resident either. They used to have to be, but it's closer to $500 to buy a grave. So just things to think about. Okay, Amber. I'm going to let Amber talk a little about this because this is, as you can see, some of the things that you can do when you pre-arrange funerals. And Amber does this every day. She literally goes out every day from Miles Funeral Home and meets 2 to 3 families. So that's how much people are into planning in advance. So I'll let her talk a little bit.
Do I need to come over there? Okay, so when I meet with families, primarily the reason why they're there to express their desires and what they want is because they don't want their children to have to worry about this. How many of you have children? More than one? Do they all get along all the time? They do. That's better than mine. But the point is that A lot of families will come in, husband and wife, or just a mother or father will come in because they want to plan so that their children are not having to make these decisions, not wondering what we should do for mom and dad. So they want to take that burden off of their children or their loved ones if they don't have children. So when they come in, again, with the slide here, it does allow you to put your wishes in writing. So we have a file with your wishes in our cabinet that has every desire, every wish that you want for your services, whether you want calling hours the night before, the same day as the Mass or service at the funeral home, which cemetery, the location of the cemetery, all of that is in writing so that your children or loved ones won't have to worry about finding or locating that information. It also allows us to record your vital data. That is the information that we will need to process any legal paperwork down the road. Death certificate, in order to get, of course, the burial permit and cremation permit, does allow us to have that so that there's no delay. Do your children know what your social security number is, or your mother's maiden name, or where your parents were born? Those are all bits of the vital data that we will need to process legal paperwork. So it's advantageous for us to have that in advance so that the children aren't searching for information and so forth. It also allows you to choose specifically the type of casket or urn, your vault. It allows you to provide the information that you want published in an obituary, whether it's an obituary in the Telegram, which, yes, we are seeing $600, $700, $800, even $1,000 for those, but it allows you to control what information is published in that obituary. We also, of course, can put the obituary or host the obituary on our website, which does reach quite a bit of folks. A lot of people nowadays will go to a funeral home website, read the obituary online, leave an online condolence. So it allows you to provide that information to us. And you also have the option to fund your funeral in advance if you wish. And there are a couple of advantages to that. You never have to do that, but if you do, it does, at this point, lock in cost of goods and services. So all of our fees, our basic services, our merchandise, transportation costs are all locked in over your lifetime. The other benefit to pre-funding, if you wish, is because once you pre-fund, the money does become protected. If you ever have to go into, God forbid, long-term care, assisted living, those funds are protected assets. The state cannot touch them. So that's another benefit there to pre-planning and getting your assets in protected order. Rick? Let's see. Oh, you already did it. All right. So we have a couple of different, and we're just, again, going into these options. Again, you never have to pre-fund, but if you do decide to pre-fund, there are a couple of different options. We have the bank trust option, which we don't use too much. A couple of reasons for that. One is that any interest earned on that is a taxable event, so you do have to report that as a taxable event. The money does remain as yours. It does follow you. And then you have the guaranteed or irrevocable option, which means that if you do, again, pre-fund in full, it does lock in the cost or guarantee the pricing of our goods and services. And the irrevocable option is what allows those funds to be protected. The preferred option that we're using right now is a life insurance. We use a couple of different insurance companies that specialize in creating these irrevocable or revocable insurance trust options for families. And just to back up a second, the state does require, when a funeral home takes in funding for pre-planning, that we place those funds in a third-party escrow agent. And the reason is because if the funeral home goes out of business, or you simply decide that you're moving, because of course family members are all over the country now, that the money is paid out to whichever funeral home performs the services, whether it's Miles, and we're not going to go out of business, right, Rick? But it's really for consumer protection. So that's why the state does require that. And again, we're using the life insurance. The life insurance does earn growth, which is not taxable. So you never have to report any of that growth on your policy. When you do have a policy set up for you, any of that growth does go back into the policy to help offset any inflationary increases in the outside fees that are not protected. All right. So again, a three-step process here when we're pre-planning for the most part. We gather, again, like I had mentioned, your biographical information, which is used for the death certificate and also for the obituary. Facts you want everyone to remember about you. And hobbies and special interests. Those are all things that you have control over, deciding what is published in an obituary. Step 2, making arrangements. You would select and meet with a funeral counselor. That's what my position is. I'm a licensed funeral director, but I also am a certified pre-planning consultant, and that is also called a pre-planning counselor. So I would meet with you and go through all the steps in order to pre-plan for yourself. We also have the option, I don't know how tech savvy most of you are, I'm sure quite tech savvy, but we do have the option to pre-plan online. So our comprehensive website has a pre-planning tab right on the main screen. If you click on it, it allows you to enter your vital information. When you hit the submit button, it comes into my email and the funeral home's email so that we know that you have started a case for yourself. And I will generally reach out and say, would you like to formally pre-plan and have your wishes formally in order, or are you simply wishing for us to have your vital information on file for the future? So I typically reach out and just try to see where you want to go with that. But that's you can do from the comfort of your own home. I know at 2 o'clock this morning when I was lying awake in bed, that is one of the things I was thinking about. I said, you know what? This is when that pre-planning option online is actually a good thing. And they did a study, and most of the pre-planning online option came in at 3 in the morning. That was the time frame. So you have a lot of people who are lying awake in bed going, why am I not sleeping? Oh, I'll go search around this website and see what I can do. It does, again, allow you to select specific merchandise services and those cash advance options that we were talking about. And then step 3, of course, is deciding if you just want to fund your funeral in advance to get those assets protected so that your children are not facing or loved ones, I should say, are not facing a financial burden down the road.
So I think that might
think that's it.
Put on board too.
Yeah.
One thing that I would mention too was when we talk about the phases of coming in and deciding when it is you want to prearrange a funeral. I always think of when I was a kid with Mrs. Miles. I've been in funeral service 45 years. And after she was getting ready to retire, and I had a few people that would stop in and they'd say, well, all my mother's prearrangements are all set. She said she talked to Dot Miles. So I'd ask Dot Miles, I'd say, do you remember this person? She goes, I know who it is. She goes, she came in to call on ours one night and a friend of hers died, and she goes, make sure I get the same thing. That was her thought of prearranging her funeral. Now the kid's thinking it's all prepaid, it's all set. So I always tell families, it's up to you whether you want to prepay, that's up to you. But we try to get them at least to put things in writing so that when the kids come in, we can say, this is what your mother wrote down. This is at that time, these are things that were important to her. The prepayment's up to the family, yeah. So I don't know if there's questions and answers.
Does anyone have a question? It's not something Rick had mentioned or the pre-planning process?
So that kind of talks about, pre-planning from what we do at the funeral home. This is kind of a solemn week for me because I always think of All Souls and All Saints as the day that, we think of the people that have gone before us and people that actually die in this period of time during All Saints and the saints that we recognize. So there's a lot going on. So you start thinking this time of year, I do anyway, about the importance of those that have gone before me. So if you have any questions as far as what we do here at St. George's and masses and funerals and our planning, any of that we can cover too. So we thought we'd just give you an overview of what we do as funeral directors, and then any questions you might have that we can answer for you. Or we covered it so comprehensively. Or you're so scared you're ready to run out to your cars, and as soon as I say go, you gotta leave.
And in your file is my card, so if you have any questions and you just can't think of it now, or you just want to kind of talk privately, feel free to reach out either to me directly at the funeral home. My email is on the card as well. Any which way is fine. So.
Yeah, one other thing I might mention before we go is that our funeral home is a little unique. We've decided to reach out. We have 7 funeral directors now. And so we have a director of community education, Pam Reedy. Pam Reedy, I think she would have been a priest if she could have been. She's an ordained minister. But Pam is very still much in our religion and faith. And she goes out to hospice. We go out with her. She was awarded to speak at the annual hospice for Massachusetts last week. So Ricky and Anali, another director, went with her, and we had displays and presented there and work with local hospices. We go to Worcester State and their nursing programs that are coming out for education. We were at Notre Dame the other day. They asked us to come back again for training for staff members. So we're doing a lot of other things at our funeral home that are a little bit unique, that we're really enjoying. And you can tell I have a smile because I just love getting out of the funeral home and coming and talking to people because I'm out of the funeral home. And my son Ricky's in funeral service with us. I think some of you have met Ricky, and of course Beverly. And we have such a great team and great friends that work with us. So even if you don't have questions today, if you have questions anytime, you can call me or call Amber or Ricky, whatever you'd like to do. And I know some of you have prearranged already. So. Right. Yeah. You have any experience when you have prearranged funeral? Yeah.
I have a question. Excuse me. My husband is a veteran, and I was told that there's a veterans funeral, a veterans cemetery.
There is.
And is that something that would be handled by you?
Right. So, it's a cemetery, so you still would have to go to a funeral home and make arrangements, and you just have to select a casket and and any of those kind of items, obituaries. And then we talk with, for example, we deal a lot with the Mass Veterans Cemetery in Winchendon that's run by the state but funded by the government. The big government cemetery would be one cemetery down the Cape, the big national cemetery. The one up here, however, is absolutely beautiful. I think if I had thought twice about it when my parents were thinking about prepaying, my father was in the Navy, I would have thought of there. It's just, it's out in the woods. It's just beautiful. And the only thing that a family would have to pay for is when the spouse of the veteran dies, I think the opening charge for the grave. But the graves are paid for, the monuments are paid for, everything for the veteran. So everything's really covered on that. From the burial aspect, it's all covered. Yeah, and we would help you with all that paperwork and transitioning.
You would?
Yeah, all that gets covered. You just, matter of fact, most of the time we find the discharge papers, so because the families are just really upset, and we already have that before they come in. So we're talking to them about what we can do for them and any options they'd like to look
But
into.
the spouse can go in the same area?
Yes.
Yeah, so they'll save a spot next to a spouse,
They-
for the spouse, yeah.
Okay, so that was a big question of mine.
Right. So that's up in Winchendon, and they're really nice to talk to. You can always call Heidi, is the one that will answer the phone. She's really spectacular. She'll answer questions, send you some information in the mail. Or if you want to go online, you can see all what they do online. And it's a great ride just to take a trip up there too. Get to some ice cream.
Well, that's good. That's a good question.
Yeah, even if the non-veteran spouse passes first, you can still go in before your
Oh,
husband.
that's a good question.
Yeah, so at the time, whether it's you who passes first as the non-veteran spouse or your husband as the veteran, they will ask at that time if the spouse is planning to be buried there as well. And there is some paperwork just for your own information. So if you're planning to go there along with your husband, they would need a marriage certificate. And I believe it's either a birth certificate or a driver's license, right?
Birth certificate.
Birth certificate, copy of each birth certificate. And of course, your husband's his discharge paperwork. But like Rick mentioned, we can generally locate that, so.
So if I made arrangements through you, you would do all of that?
We can arrange, right, we can talk to Winchendon for you. You need your signature, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful spot too.
Maybe before I leave, you could give me her name,
Yep, I can, we can do that. Sure can,
so then they would just send me some information.
correct.
Yeah, and they
Or
allow
if you
you to
leave your,
pre-register there too.
yeah, you can leave your information with Amber, she can make sure she sends it to you.
Yeah, I can get it to you in the mail.
Yeah, we can make the call for you and have it sent.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
The term cash disbursements, I know what it means, but in this context, I'm not quite sure what that refers to.
So cash disbursements are any fees that don't typically originate from the funeral home, but we include those in the funeral estimate and the billing because we pay them out on behalf of the family. Those are things like a grave opening, a cemetery opening, any newspaper obituary charges, death certificates, anything that doesn't necessarily originate from the funeral home but is part and parcel of your services. So, you're welcome.
So I don't think we have any other questions, right? Paul, you don't have any? Deacon Paul? All right. So we just want to thank you once again. We wish you the best in the upcoming holidays as you share that up with your family. One thing that we've done, or at least talked about doing more often, is talk of a lifetime, which is having a talk like we're doing now. It's advanced planning, and we have a little game with cards. And I always think of this time of year, Thanksgiving coming up, and how important it is to let your family know, how you feel about them, but also tell them a little bit about who you are. Sometimes as kids, we're so busy around Thanksgiving and Christmas that we're just running around doing kid stuff. But we have a little card game, and we're going to look into that. The more I see the holidays coming, the more I want to do that. And the card game really asks questions. So we go around the table and you look at the questions. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and they learn things about their parents or grandparents that they would never have known, and those things stay with those kids forever. Those questions answered. So you think about it during the holidays. Get the grandkids around, or nieces, nephews, or whoever those people that are important to you, and let them know who you are, because that's something that's lost if not told, right? So anyway, thank you for having us. We appreciate it. It's a great honor for us to be here with all our friends from St. George's. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.